lacrosse time, and we're up to the 70's, the more successful part of the 70's that I participated in. And I wonder if we could have Paul Stiglich, Graeme Fox, and Jonh Grant to come up and talk a little bit about successful in the 1970's.
First, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to do this. We certainly felt the great year in the 70's, and following on from what we're hearing today about the 50's and the 60's, it was good to be part of. I've got Graeme and John, I'm going to sort out some other stuff over there, maybe on the noise somewhere. Anyway. We're all getting pretty old. We're not the oldest here, there's quite a few of us here.
I think your phone's going old. Could you turn it off, please?
And now it's pretty hard to test the memory at times and remember some of the facts. So hopefully we get it right. Yeah, so just an apology overall, and for those who are not with us now as well, rest in peace. We had to get together and get some of this information and put it together the best we can. Graeme's did a lot of research and John's had his bit, and so did I. But we formed a team to get put together our presentation, and that's the way we play in the team. So if anyone's got any corrections, they're most welcome, but I'm certainly happy to fix them up for the future and leave something behind for other generations to come. My first game for Melbourne Uni, and talked a bit about Liam's talked about. Liam was the captain of this team, and it was IB 1971. I fought with in fact I was at Glenroy, and I was put off coming and playing full time at that point to play with Glenroy, who were a struggling young team as well. And during this first session at the university team, I was convinced to come on and play as well, and I certainly enjoyed the rest of my time at Melbourne. And so next year, in '72, I joined up. And in that team, Ian was there, and Dave, and a lot of these names have been mentioned. And as well, there's a few names up there that we didn't quite know the full name, so everyone knows, let us know. But yeah, it was a good introduction, and myself and Robbie and Johnny Bradbury were a couple of young blokes there. Noel was there. His hair's not as dark as it used to be. He's up the background, and we all started having some great friendships along with the guys that were there, and some of those guys dropped off the next couple of years as far as I was playing. I wrote the pictures worth 1,000 words, so I put a lot of pictures together to do this presentation, and hopefully some of you can see yourselves on the screen. Part of that, 71, was something that happens in universities, and most of you probably know that, and that was my university team. And I struggled to work out who played for who in my university team. But there was 3 teams played: Melbourne, Adelaide, and Monash. And Graham Ross certainly produced that today that they won the overall event. Well, I'm not quite sure if it's in the trophy somewhere, maybe on the years and stuff, but there was a tie over the series. But during that, and signed off there with Jeff West, and we've heard his name already tonight, and Jeff was the strong point at that point as far as I was meeting when I started. And we'd rock up at the gym in the gym there, and Jeopardy there throwing the balls at us and teaching us how to play the game if we hadn't played before. Just the new guys that come along. And you'd be on the other side of the gym, and you'd be getting covered with balls from Jeff, and you could still throw a mean ball. I think it was that 10 from memory. So that was my introduction as well in that time. But there's several players in that team there that went on and played for Australia and other things like that as well. So we had some stiff competition, and Monash had a pretty good team out there. And I wasn't quite sure what team Phil played for. He must have played for, because he's not in the picture, for Melbourne. But as we did in those days, a lot of players were going from one university to the others and various postgrads or whatever in that situation. Graeme said to me earlier tonight he was doing some postgrad studies somewhere and he got to play for Monash, so they ring him in. So in 72, as I said, my first year, full year time, and I'm not in this photo because myself and Bill both played for Victoria that year, and we played for Victoria, and I don't think we could afford to go to Adelaide as students, as a lot of you guys get out there probably at those times, the students these days in terms of that situation. And but yeah, and it was the start of some great friendships in that team there, and a few of those names are already heard tonight as well. So yeah, and it was good to sign. So the 73 team came up next, and 73 was the start of a strong era that was mentioned tonight, and we were so fortunate. Right, sorry, thanks Graeme, that's what team it's about. As I said, we're getting on in years. But yeah, so 73, we were extremely fortunate to get the previous Australian coach for 1972. And that was part of that team, and my brother was part of that team. And yeah, so Terry decided to come and coach Melbourne Uni. And no one can tell me why and how he decided to do that. His shop that he used to run wasn't far from Melbourne. He'd done a lot of coaching over his career at Melbourne and all that sort of thing, but we appreciated the fact that he came and coached us. And he started to drive some success back into the team, and then he told you how they'd gone through that time, and they were coming back up, and we enjoyed a bit of success along the way. And by the 30th of June at that time, we were top of the ladder in our grade, but unfortunately we got beaten in the preliminary final, and I think some of the other top clubs and big clubs, they dropped a couple of players down and probably rolled us. But anyway, it was one of those things that happened. I'm not sure whether it happened in some of these funny things happened in 73, or was certainly in a varsity situation. We had our dinner and ended up with just about the whole Adelaide University team in my youth. Driving from where the dinner was, and I think in the back of my head it was Carlton. So anyway, driving down all the way down St Kilda Road, and the old car was wobbling around as we drove down the road. And, I'm glad that the cops went around. Anyway, I got them back to their hotel in St Kilda, and everyone got home safely, I think. So yeah, but it was certainly a dodgy trip. There was another dodgy trip a bit later in Adelaide in 75, where I wasn't driving, but one of the Adelaide boys was. 74 as we've sort of been indicating. In 74 we won the division grand final, A3, that we played in. In fact, we beat every team that year in A2. We only lost one game to an A2 team as we played. And we played out at the old Fitzroy footy ground, and there was a lot of fun we had going on. A couple of pictures there of the team. And later on, the presentation dinner when it was held, and Terry getting stuck into he's probably trying to do a 30 Stewart there. Let's go the champagne and the trophy. But yeah, it was a good night, it was a good year, and we had a good team and a good effort going on. Sorry, the games, from what I've seen in recent times, and I did go and watch a game at the Nationals Footscray recently, last year, I think I got along. And the games today are so low scoring. The game we won the premiership in we scored 27 goals to 23 against MCC. And the guy on the right here, he scored not a lucky 9. Another guy, Stevie, sitting up the back through 7. Yeah, so, and we had a great goalkeeper as well. He had 23 thrown against him, Bud. So it made it a good little team, yeah. But yeah, it was a great time, and we did well. After that, we got promoted. That's the score sheet, sorry, I missed a couple of slides here. And 75, 76, we got promoted up to A grade, and serious A grade. And yeah, we had a couple of interesting things happen. I can't quite, I got the feeling in the back of my head that we trained there at the training ground one night, and then a chap come up, and his name was Mark, and he was an American guy that came over and he wanted to play with us. So we did, and he did. So he joined in, and he was part of the team. But also we played up, and one of the things that I had to do, and Graham's probably in the same situation where he had to play against his brother in the opposition team, but we had to play against Caulfield when my brother was, and Graham Ross was, and yeah, there's the bottom picture's a picture of my brother having a go at me, so there's no holes barred on the lacrosse field, I'll tell you that much. And Randy always tells a story about running into Peter, and you normally bounce off Peter, he doesn't bounce off you, or he just runs straight through you. And in those days, and Foxy there's in the centre going against Peter on it, that's him. And so yeah, we played pretty well overall in those couple of years, but we didn't quite make the finals. We just missed out one year. And it might have been, we played against Surrey one day, and I can remember John, we're warming up on the ground, and Foxy hasn't got his helmet on, and John's let one go, and it's gone straight in the eye. And we're lucky for Graeme. He did play, but I don't know how much. I don't think we won the game. So, but that were the sort of things we got up to. Yeah. So now we're going to hand over, and I think is Graeme going to talk, or is it Jonh going to talk next? Okay, Graham's going to talk a bit more about university.
Thanks, Steve. Look, I've had the thunder stolen by my brother a bit early on too, so my talk is going to be quite brief. But I think, like Ian said, your time at uni, I have lots of memories, but my highlight was playing for a university sporting club. I was lucky enough to play for 2, but my experiences would have been exactly the same as all you people, or most of you people in this room. It is a privilege and a lifetime of memories to be able to play lacrosse at Melbourne University, as well as any other university club too. I had a lot of good fun at the cricket club as well. I think on top of that, lacrosse is like a magical and mystical sort of sport that has all these powers that drags people together and creates friendships and it gives you lots of memories and things. And on top of that, obviously IB has been a great time, a big bonus if you played in the time that we did, and I'm sure that most of you have experienced some IB experiences. I think Granny's got a couple he's going to tell us about later on. But that's been a good time for me. I had 2 stories that I wanted to tell. The brothers pinched one of them, but I might tell the other one. And just to add to Stiga, in our grand final game that was 27-23, we had one of the guys who was a freshman in the team, hadn't actually played in the premiership team that year, but played up in the A grade a couple of years later. He was a pretty talented sort of player, but Snake, before the grand final, had said he would drink a beer for every goal that was scored. Now, when you think that it was 27-23 and there were 50 goals scored, I'm not sure that he made it, but he was pretty ordinary that night. One of the stories I wanted to tell you about was in 1975, I played in what I think was the first past players game that Melbourne University Cross Club ever had. There were some notable people at that game. It was played out in Baronia of all places. Why it was there, I don't know. And on the spectators list, we've heard some of these names mentioned tonight already. John Chinner was a past president of the club, and he was also a Rhodes Scholar. Wally McRae Russell, Dr. Walter McRae Russell, I should say, was a long-time benefactor of the club. I think he was a 3-time Blue, and that was from 1912. I think Doug mentioned he finished playing in 1920. They were both spectators at the game. Our referee that day was Don Raymond, who 3 years later was head referee at the World Championship final between the US and Canada in Manchester. So we had a lot of fairly notable people there. Playing on the past players team was Jeff West, who was the current president of the club at that time. And surprisingly, there were 5 people who are here tonight who played in the past players team. And they were Phil Parker, Graham Ross, Graham Lee, Ferg Stewart and Doug Fox, amongst a number of other very good ex-players. On our team, it was, as we said, a premiership team in 1974. A lot of those had played too, so on my table up the back there, including us here, we had 8 players who were playing in that game in 1975. So 48 years on, there are 13 people here who were involved in that first past players game, and it just shows you the way that lacrosse sort of connects people and keeps you glued together over the years, I guess. Terry Ellington, who was our coach, who'd been long-time Australian, Victorian, all sorts of coaching that he'd done. He was also the editor of the Lacrosse magazine, and he said at the time, he wrote a little report that said the past players won the game 8-7, and they'd also managed to get to the referee and the timekeeper to ensure that the result was that way. Now, I've been involved in a number of past players games since that time, and in fact I've worn a shirt on a couple of occasions that said, "Youth and skill will always outsmart," youth and skill are youth and skill are no match for old age and treachery. Thank you for that. And I am sure that the origin of that phrase was born in that 1975 game when those pricks, those old age people beat us. And I will just lastly give you, I'll go over the quick story that Doug pinched from me before too, but we've been having a number of reunions, and John's going to mention a couple of reunions in the time, but in 2014 we had a 40-year reunion of our 1974 premiership team. We had 10 of that team present. A couple have died, unfortunately, in that time, but most of them were all there, along with a few extra supporters from the time and since that time. Chopper was there. Chopper's every time you hear there's a Melbourne University Lacrosse Club thing on, he's there, but he was there at that night. And we had hoped to get Jeff West on up there too, but unfortunately his health intervened. But during the night, Chopper had managed to get an audio link up with Jeff. And John asked him a number of questions, along which do you think was the best university team you've ever been involved in? And John thought, well, it has to be the 70's team. I thought, well, I'd watched my brother Doug and all the other people I mentioned tonight playing during the 60's, and I thought they would be the best team. Jeff said, no, it's a 1950 team. So I think what we can say is that, if I could paraphrase, greatness is in the eye of the beholder. And I would just like to finish my little bit by saying that we've all been a part of a very rich history, very rich and colourful history of the Melbourne Uni Lacrosse Club, and we've been very fortunate to be part of that fraternity, if you like, and hopefully it'll keep going in the future. But we've been very, very lucky, very fortunate to be part of that. So I'll pass it over to John.
Can everyone hear me okay? Very good. So, when I first went to Melbourne University, Foxy and I both, we had to drop from A1 or State 1 down to A3, was it? We joined in and we weren't too keen at the idea. But everyone said, look, when you go to university, it's really important you aim for a blue or 2. I said, well, we're going to be playing Williamstown this year. A3 will be more than a blue or 2. And so it was. A3 was full of blues and we managed to climb out of it. But the other thing they didn't tell you about lacrosse in those days, and just to give myself a backup, I joined the water ski club. I thought, being a cutting engineer, if I joined the water ski club, we get access to a boat, good-looking women, we can get time off. I got a car park as a secretary who didn't have to do anything. And I thought, this has got to be the best place, but I was wrong. In fact, it wasn't about lacrosse at all, it was all about the social life we had. So, university, going to Adelaide was my first experience of social life. So, there's a few records started, well, I've got to pick you up on. So, first of all, those of us who could didn't catch the train. I borrowed my mother's Capella Rotary and we did a 5-hour trip to Adelaide overnight. And I'm still waiting for that one to be broken. Secondly, we also ended up in the park near Colonel Line. But we went on better. We got our non-playing manager arrested that night. The rest of us managed to run when the blue lights had turned up, but he wasn't too quick. So he got arrested for watering down Colonel Light's statue. Hit the front page the next day on the Adelaide Advertiser with the headlines, Victorian teacher has no feelings for South Australia's past. And so social life just warmed up at that stage. I remember someone in the South of the Adelaide team had an alpha, and somehow we crammed into it. Was it?
It was bad to Joe.
Anyway, all I remember is we were on the Glenelg jetty doing 360-degree wheelies at the end of the jetty. I hope I can swim. I hope I can swim. So anyway, what really made a big difference after every match, it wasn't just hitting to the pub. We ended up at parties at people's houses. We ended up doing events afterwards. And it became the glue that really formed the team, and it still forms the team. So we've had a 20-year reunion where I think we had about 20 people, and then a 40-year reunion where Foxy said we had about 14 past players, and we had a dinner last year where we had 16 of our players turned up. So the memories of catching up with people. Colin's the only one that's had a reasonable excuse not coming from Japan. The rest have had a bit of pressure on them to get there. So in my little way, I reckon the real record set in lacrosse was the companionship that you developed. And learning from some of my peers that if you put a doctor's coat on and wear a stethoscope, you get into the greatest parties.
Thanks so much.